Welcome to Uncaged on the talkSPORT MMA YouTube channel. I'm Adam Catterall. Pleasure as always to be alongside you. Normally, alongside me is Brendan Loughnane, the PFL featherweight, who is in the semi-final of the championships this weekend in Washington, D.C. That's why he's not here. So, we've drafted in the knowledge. Check this out as an extra special treat for people consuming the stuff, and I'm sure that you are going to be blown away by the things that this man is going to say throughout the course of the next 30 minutes. It is the one, the only, Blake Harrison. How are you, mate? You good?
I'm good. When you say they're going to be blown away, is that by the absolute nonsense that's going to come out of my mouth?
Absolutely not. Listen.
You're going to be getting comments like, what's he talking about? Sticks it in between us, you mug.
Not at all. I think a lot of people that consume the stuff that we've been doing here on talkSPORT are into the MMA game, so they'll be absolutely fully aware, one, your love of this crazy sport that we all follow,
Sure.
and two, the lengths that you go to cover it as well, mate, because it's not just obviously acting that you do and do it incredibly well, but the amount of times I've seen you at MMA shows doing what I do in those journalist seats, mate, covering it for your own podcast as well, exactly, in the media room. So tell us a little bit more about that, because I've no doubt we've got new audience members consuming the show that are thinking, I know his face from the telly. Why is he talking MMA? But you're a massive fan and you've got your own podcast with it. So give us a little bit more of that background.
Yeah, so I do the MMA fan show with Stu Whiffin, and the whole point of it was that, we're not journalists, we're not ex-fighters. I mean, Stu's done Muay Thai for many, many, many years, and I dabble in training, just try and not get beat up too badly, is basically my vibe. But we love the sport, we love it, and it was just one of those things where we kind of found each other for a random set of circumstances, and we didn't have mates that talked about MMA with the same passion and knowledge that we had for it. So we kind of had little kindred spirit in each other there that we go, oh, we can talk about this sport that we love at a level that we really want to talk about it. We've done great interviews with like the likes of, well, yourself, you've been on the show, Nick B's been on the show, Dan Hardy, Alexander Volkanovski, Michael Bisping, Tyron Woodley, Jamal Hill. Like, we've had Dan Hooker, we've had them all on from all over, really. We've had great interviews with fighters, but we also discuss, the prelude to a big pay-per-view, the post-fight shows on like pay-per-view events and all that kind of stuff. And we just really enjoy talking about it and having a laugh, not taking it too seriously, but also really paying respect to these athletes who we're in just awe of some of these people that do this sport. And it's a really great thing to have an outlet to talk about a sport that you love in the manner that we get to do it.
I think that's the key thing of your show, mate. It's highlighting the personalities behind these lunatics that shut a cage door behind themselves in front of 20,000 people, millions around the world, sat in their underpants, and decide to have a little bit of a throwdown. There's far more to those characters, of which I think your show absolutely highlights, mate.
Yeah, no, thanks. As I say, we've had some really great interviews over the years where we really try and talk about, what got them into MMA to begin with, and then we talk through like any rituals they might have, process the psychology of it, because you just touched on the psychology of getting in there in front of not just maybe 20,000 people, but the millions of people watching around the world and all that stuff. You can become a meme in seconds in this game, and there's a sport like no other. Like, you can watch a football match and be like, oh, it's 0-0, and in the 91st minute, someone's got the ball, they've booted it out, and someone goes and scores a goal. But there's a build-up to it. You go, oh, he's running down the wing. Oh, and he's got it. It's an amazing moment. It's an amazing thing. But it's not the same as Leon Edwards being down 4.5 rounds with just a minute to go or whatever it is. And out of nowhere, within literally a second and a half, he went from getting absolutely smashed by Kamaru Usman in technically their second fight, Salt Lake City, wherever it was, to that head kick landing in a second and a half, and the whole thing spun on its head. There's no other sport that does it for me. And I mean, even boxing for me, I know you're a huge boxing fan. I don't mind a bit of boxing, but it just doesn't grab me like MMA does. There's so many ways a fight can go. There's so many tools you have to have in your arsenal as a fighter and all that stuff. And just, the fact that it can turn on a dime, man, all that stuff, I love this sport so much.
It's Ultimate Fighting, man. It's the greatest show on earth. I'm going to put you on the spot a few times throughout the course of this 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
At the moment, as we stand here right now, I'm just going to say it to you and just tell me the first one that comes into your mind.
Okay.
What's your favourite fight of all time? Go.
Oh, Gastelum Adesanya for the interim belt. I love that. Just because it used to be Lorna McDonald too, because that was just insane. But I just think there's some technical moments that, like, when you rewatch Lorna McDonald, it's amazing. But for me, it feels like a fight of its time. It's still great. You won't find another fight that has the desire, the heart, and the determination like these two warriors had in that moment. But what Adesanya Gastelum gives you is it gives you that, but it also gives you some technical, just beautiful striking. And it's fantastic, man.
Mate, apps as well, because we'll be speaking about Israel Adesanya a little bit later on in the programme.
Yeah.
We'll start, shall we, with my regular co-host, Mr. Brendan Loughnane, who is in action on Friday evening. He's done extremely well so far. Obviously, former featherweight champion with the PFL. Fell short last year, but he's back to hopefully regain that championship this time around. Semi-finals, Kai Kamaka is the man that is standing across from him. First and foremost, talk to me about your knowledge and love of Brendan Loughnane, because we get a lot of pomp, we get a lot of ceremony with the guys and girls that participate in the UFC, but there's a lot of other franchises out there where a lot of British fighters are doing extremely well at the moment. And I say Brendan is actually the flag bearer, along with Dakota Chiba in the PFL, for the best of the rest.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had Brendan on the show a while back, and I think he's got such a great story because he had that really kind of crappy moment. I don't know how many...
Bizarre. Just bizarre, mate. He should have been taken on by the UFC.
He should have been taken on by the UFC. It was a contender series, right? Or something like that. He should have been taken on by the UFC. He wasn't. I don't know what Dana's problem with him was, especially when you look at the contender series now, and they just seem to take on anyone that wins. I felt like he was really hard done by. So the story of Brendan Loughnane, to go through that, have his dream ripped away from him, and then go, okay, I'm going to pick myself back up. I'm going to dust myself off. I'm going to go to the PFL. And then he wins the £1 million tournament, which, I mean, it's a different level. Like, we can talk about the UFC and the fame and the fortune it can give you, and maybe the level of competition overall is tougher, especially at the top end of the division. But to do a guaranteed 4 fights in 8 months, that's so hard to do. That's about right, isn't it? The season about 4 fights in 8 months. That's really hard for someone to do, to make weight all those times, to try and stay injury-free, manage your training in a very specific way around that season. To do that, I think, is incredibly impressive. And Brendan's gone and done that. And as you say, he's been the flag bearer for kind of UK MMA outside of the UFC. And I think he's done a fabulous, fabulous job of it. And, you know, it could, that moment with Dana White and as I say, having that dream kind of ripped away from him, could be the greatest thing for him and his kids and his grandkids and all that, because he could be looking at getting higher purses per fight than what he ever would have done in the UFC, plus £1 million for winning it in 2022, and hopefully another £1 million for winning it in 2024. I mean, it works out well for the bank balance, doesn't it?
It does work out well for the bank balance, and I think you've just painted the perfect picture of what Brendan Loughnane is, and anybody that is a big MMA fan knows all about him. And this weekend, on Friday night in Washington, D.C., he is the main event. He's got a tough one. Kai Kamaka's been very, very good in the PFL tournament so far. He's been very decision-heavy with his victories to this particular point. Brendan's the number 1 seed because he's been knocking people out and doing what Brendan Loughnane always does. But this one's going to be a really interesting matchup because we know what Brendan can do. I think his takedown defense is extremely good. And I think he's going to need it against Kamaka, who's wrestler-based, wrestler-heavy. He's a decent boxer, but if you're going to say that this is going to be a stand-up fight, Loughnane, listen, people think we're going to be biased because it's his show, but Brendan, in stand-up exchanges, I think he's going to have the majority of the success. It's going to come down, for me, to those grappling exchanges. Can Brendan keep this fight on the feet for long enough in order to do what he needs to do?
Yeah, I mean, I watched a little bit of Kamaka versus Bubba Jenkins, and it was very much a role reversal there. Bubba Jenkins was the one that was desperately trying to take him down, and Kamaka was happy to keep it on the feet and do it. And I kind of think Brendan's also fought Bubba and won. Yeah. And I kind of think if he's able to deal with that level of wrestler, I don't see why he wouldn't be able to deal with the level that Kamaka's at. Because I don't put him as like one of those kind of elite wrestlers of that division. I think he's quite a good all-rounder. And one thing that it seems to me is that he seems to get better as the fight goes on. And it seems to be that his cardio is really good. So he goes to a lot of decisions. Obviously, Brendan, we know of late, it's like 4 fights, knockout win streak he's on now or something like that. He's doing really well, Brendan, at the moment with finishing fights early, getting those quick sixes in the PFL and stuff like that. So I think you're right. I think he will want to keep it on the feet, but I think he should be able to deal with it quite well. So I think he'll be expecting Kamaka to try and go for the takedowns. And I don't think Kamaka will be the best wrestler Brendan's ever faced. So I'm confident Brendan can keep it on the feet. I just think it wouldn't actually be a bad idea, I think, for Brendan to maybe initiate a little bit of a grappling exchange at some point as well, just to throw Kamaka off a little bit and go, I can do this stuff too. Because Brendan's well-rounded. He's good at everything, I think, Brendan. And I think what I always worry about with when you get a sort of either a striker versus a grappler type fight is when the striker is so worried about the takedown and not thinking enough about the strikes coming their way. And I think when you're the wrestler in that situation, you're only worrying about the strikes. It makes it a much simpler plan for you to deal with the person opposite you. And I think if Brendan can just do something where he reverses something like Leon did with Bilal at points, or if he even initiates a takedown and doesn't go anywhere, but just goes, like, you got to worry about me as well, mate. And something like that might just do him the world of good to just keep the striking flowing and opening him up for that kind of stuff.
Obviously, I'm a man of extreme bias when it comes to talking about these two particular fighters in the PFL, but we've already seen Dakota Tchiva get herself through to the final of the PFL Championships in her first attempt. Sensational. Mancunian. We've got another Mancunian here on Friday night. He's just got to put the rubber stamp on that. I mean, what an unbelievable time that would be. Outside of the UFC, as I've said, these two fighters from the north of England to be in the final of the PFL on the cusp of winning $1 million checks, mate. Just shows where British MMA is at right now.
Yeah. I think, as you say, I mean, British MMA seems to be just flourishing at the moment. And you mentioned, obviously, Brendan and Dakota, and fingers crossed that they get their £1 million checks and all that stuff. But if we go back to the UFC as well, I mean, 2 champions. I don't consider Tom an interim champion. I consider him a champion. Actually, no, not 2 champions anymore, is it? I'm living in the golden age of when Leon had the belt. It still feels weird to say Bilal's champion, if I'm honest. 1 champion, but you know, Leon not long ago champ and still a great fighter. And then you look at things like the featherweight division. We've got like Lerone, we've got Arnold Allen, we've got Nathaniel Woods. We've got great fighters there. I mean, I don't know what's going on with poor old Mohamed Bakayev at the moment. Hopefully that gets sorted out. I don't know whether he goes away to another organisation like an Octagon or something like that for a year or 2 and comes back. I do think the UFC will bring him back in, but 7-fight win streak, really, he should be fighting for the flyweight belt next. And obviously, for reasons that I'm not overly aware of, it's not happening. But UK MMA at the moment is the best it's ever been for my money.
Yeah, completely agree, mate. Whilst we're still flirting with the PFL story, a little bit later on, don't forget to tune in on the talkSPORT YouTube channel, 6 p.m. UK time, so it's 1 p.m. American Eastern Time. There will be a press conference from the PFL, which involves Francis Ngannou. Listen, love Francis to bits. What a story. He's had some major, major challenges this year alone, both personally and professionally as well, stepping into the world of boxing. And he's now coming off the back of his first heavy, heavy knockout defeat in the world of boxing from Anthony Joshua. But he steps back into the smart cage, making his PFL debut later on this year, mate. I'm extremely excited just to see Francis Ngannou in heavyweight MMA gloves once again. And Renan Ferreira is going to be the man stepping across from him. We've got the press conference coming up later on at 6 o'clock, so we'll learn a little bit more about that. But how excited are you to see Francis back?
I'm very excited to see Francis back in MMA. I mean, my only concern is what Francis do we see? I mean, what has it been, like 2.5 years since he's been inside the cage? I know he's been doing boxing and all that, but that might mean his hands are even slicker than they were before. Not that he was necessarily told he had the slickest hands. It was more about the power. But, I mean, doing that boxing training is going to help in one aspect, but then you worry defensively. Is he going to be used to those massive gloves protecting his face and, smaller gloves now? You've touched on the personal issues. I mean, how heartbreaking. Everything he's been through in his story to lose a child is just, you can't imagine what that's like and how much that may affect you. So it's certainly going to be very, very intriguing to see what kind of Francis Ngannou we see back in the cage. But for sure, this is a fight that will interest people. I mean, Francis Ngannou, the lineal MMA heavyweight champion, if you want to say it like that. I mean, Dana White can talk about John Jones as much as you want. John Jones had 3 years to step up in weight and fight Ngannou, and he waited until he was gone. So you can make of that whatever you will. Ngannou then, he's chased the dream. Look what he did to Fury. A lot of people say, well, Fury wasn't quite on it, whatever. But hey, he did it in his first boxing fight. What a story that would have been. He didn't win the fight, but he certainly won the night. The fans were all over him. They thought it was phenomenal. AJ, obviously very different. A knockout like that can change you. And we saw that when he was when he was beaten by Stipe, his next fight was Derek Lewis, and it was a ball fest. And he was very gun-shy. Is he going to be gun-shy after what happened with AJ? Maybe. Maybe he will. And I don't think you want to be gun-shy against someone like Renan Ferreira because, all right, he's not the creme de la creme of heavyweight MMA, but he's 6'8". He's an absolute beast. He hits hard. He's on a knockout streak of, again, I think he's like 4 wins, 4 by knockout, something like that. He's doing very, very well, Renan Ferreira, with the competition in front of him. I mean, Ryan Bader, I would say, is someone that's undersized, but he was smashing it in Bellator. And Ferreira just dealt with him very, very easily. So it'd be really interesting to see. I want to see old Francis back. I want to see him just go out there and maybe sort of do what he did against Jairzinho Rosenstrike, where he just said, screw it. Just chuck some bungalows at someone's face. Let's just do that. That's the Ngannou I want to see. And that's the Ngannou I think could do well. So, yeah, I want to see it. I hope it happens. And Francis Ngannou's story is a story that should be made into a Hollywood film at some point. It is an unreal story, what he's been through in his life. If he can come back now and come back to a win, oh man, I honestly think I might get emotional. If he comes back and wins that fight, spectacular, it might get dusty in the Blake Harrison household. I really hope he does well.
I agree, mate. Completely agree. And as I said a moment or two ago, the press conference for Francis Ngannou, Renan Ferreira, from Washington, D.C. is taking place at 6 p.m. a little later on this afternoon, UK time. Gareth A. Davies will be there for talkSPORT, so make sure you're on the channel. Shall we talk Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya? We've not had a full review on this.
Is that your attempt at South African accent?
Yeah, it was a little bit. Dricus. We haven't had a full review of 305 since it all took place. What was your... Take away what you know now. What was your pre-fight thoughts going into that? Who did you think was going to come out victorious?
I really didn't know. I mean, for obviously different reasons, but much like what I just said about Ngannou, I didn't know what Izzy we were going to see. Yeah. I was like, a year out of the cage, just the longest break he's had in God knows how long. And Dricus seems to just have that weird style where you're just like, I don't know how good he is. He looks really odd, and it shouldn't work, but it does, and all that kind of stuff. And I think, I think going into it, I really wasn't sure which way it could go. I could really see Dricus running into a big shot from Izzy and getting knocked out, but I could see Dricus over time wearing Izzy down, and I think that's maybe sort of what we ended up seeing.
Yeah, pre-fight, I was all Israel Adesanya, mate, because like exactly what you just said. I thought stylistically, you look at what Dricus does. It's very effective, but it doesn't look right. And big winging shots coming in with your face looking straight into the eyes of a sniper, you're going to get clipped. And that happened. If we're really honest and analysing the fight now that it's played out, Dricus du Plessis took punishment in that fight.
Yeah.
But he's double hard. He's got an amazing chin. He took some unbelievable shots to the body. And that's the thing that I take away from this fight, Israel Adesanya did everything that he was supposed to do to an extent in that fight. Yeah. He just got run over. Dricus du Plessis' biggest asset, I would say, is his heart, the dog that he's got in him. He just would not be refused that evening. And even though I don't know how you scored this, but going into the fourth round, I've got Israel Adesanya 2-1 up. Start of the fourth round, I've got Israel Adesanya looking good at range again. I'm thinking, okay, here we go. And then he just run him over. Yep. It was a phenomenal display of I will not be defeated this evening from Dricus du Plessis, which then gives me loads of questions as to, right, who can beat this fella? I'm looking around at the 185ers, and he's already gone through Robert Whittaker. Maybe Robert Whittaker took him lightly. Maybe. Mm-hmm. Who knows? There's some other people. Obviously, we've got a great fight this weekend with Jared Cannonier taking on Kyle Barallo. I'm a big fan of both of those guys. Maybe there's something there. But the more arguments that I make as to how somebody can beat Dricus du Plessis, I think to myself, the best striker in the division could not stop him. So who's the guy? I don't know if there's somebody there yet, mate. Maybe the guy in the division above has to come down to show that power. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I think the other thing to say about Adesanya is this wasn't the Adesanya that fought Sean Strickland for me. This was Adesanya on form.
Much better. Better.
I thought he looked fantastic. I actually had it 2-1 to Dricus going into the fourth when watching it live. But I actually rewatched a little bit of it this morning before coming on here. And I think you might be right. I think it might have been 2-1 Adesanya going into the fourth. And I had Adesanya winning until he sort of got clipped and rocked. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the wheels really fell off. It was an Adesanya that was coming forward. And I said on pre-show for the MMA fan show when we were doing that if Adesanya does the whole, I'm just going to step backwards and do what he did against Romero's and Jared Cannoniers and stuff like that, I think he's going to get done because Dricus is just going to run him over. But he didn't. He came forward. He did what he did against like the Paulo Costas and stuff like that. And
he still got run over.
He still got run over.
That's
he
the
looked fantastic.
Thing.
He looked really, really good. So just credit to Dricus, man. I mean, I heard in the post-fight press conference, he had some game plan with his coach where he knew Adesanya was going to come forward. So for the first 2 rounds, he just stood his ground. Then his coach would shout something or, get the cattle prod out and start shoving it against the cage or whatever he was doing. And Dricus then was like, right, now my turn to come forward. And he reckons that was his way of wearing Adesanya out because Adesanya's not used to coming forward and putting the pressure on. And Jesus, man, what a game plan. It worked.
Brilliant.
It worked. He seemed to wear him down over time. But yeah, I mean, fascinating. In terms of who can beat him, I mean, we see Rob get absolutely smashed by him. And I love Rob. Rob's one of my favourite fighters.
Big time.
But, I mean, I think for this, Dana's saying Strickland, I don't want to see it. I mean, I have to say I did score the Strickland du Plessis fight for Strickland. Got no problem if you scored it for Dricus. Like, no problem at all. I did score it for Strickland. Sorry?
It was a tight fight. It was a tight fight.
These things happen. It was a tight fight. So you can make that fight happen and market it on, it was a slightly controversial, who really won, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. But Strickland had won. He never defended his title. He got the title fight just sheer through luck because Dricus wasn't ready to fight the belt. So to give him a title shot right away, I'm not really a big fan of it. I think Dricus in the post-fight press conference as well was saying that how you can give it to Strickland when Rob beat Costa in more exciting fashion and he's also just absolutely smashed Alaskarov. And now he's going and fighting Khamzat Chimaev. Like, how you can give it to Strickland over Rob, especially if Rob beats Khamzat, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I think for the sake of the division and fresh matchups, I think we need to see Khamzat beat Rob, and that is the guy that gets the title shot. But you can't trust Khamzat at the moment. I know it's not always his fault. He gets ill, but there's visas and there's all these different things that I'm hearing about. I don't know, man. Can you trust Khamzat? Do you have to put Khamzat in a fight and go, we need a backup. We need Strickland to be the backup or something like that? I don't know. But I do want to see it, though. I want to see Khamzat actually get that title shot and go, are you the guy we always thought you were? When you come onto the scene and had like 3 fights in a month and a half or whatever it was, everyone was going nuts for him. 2 freeweight world champion, people were going crazy, all this stuff. Then he struggles with the weight. Obviously, he had COVID, not his fault. He's been ill with other things. Who knows whether that's related to long COVID or anything? I don't know. We can hypothesize as much as we like. But I really want to see if he's the guy we all thought he was. Sticking Hamzat in there against Dricus du Plessis, I mean, that's a fun fight.
It is. It's incredibly fun. But I just think to myself, Dricus has only got to survive 5 minutes. Survive 5 minutes, the guy will gas out, and then Dricus will do what Dricus does. So, listen, I just want to pay massive credit to Dricus du Plessis because, yes, aesthetically, yes, visually, I look at it and I go, this is mad. How's that working? But it works. Fair play to him. He's the guy at 185. For me, he's just beaten the best striker in the division. He's beaten Robert Whittaker as well. Mm-hmm. The guy deserves his props. And what I hope happens for him is that the UFC do take him to South Africa and allow him to defend that crown in front of his people, whoever it is against these people. I think it will be Sean, though, won't it? I think that will be the fight that they make. And then hopefully, as you've just said, Robert Whittaker and Hamzat firstly happens, it plays out, and the king of that absolutely gets a shot at the title in 2025, you would imagine, mate. Fantastic stuff. What did you make of the rest of the card? Guy Cora France should not have that amount of power in his hand, should he, for a guy that's only 125 pounds?
I mean, hardest here in the flyweight division, and I thought Steve was actually doing pretty well up to that point as well. I really liked Steve.
Very good.
Yeah, I thought he was avoiding the shots, hitting him with strikes, and then all of a sudden, Kai just put like an extra punch on a combination that Steve wasn't expecting. He had his chin in the air, and boom, that was it. I mean, phenomenal stuff. Is it a title shot next for Kai? Flyweight's in a weird place, especially with the situation with Makayev that we've already mentioned.
Probably say yeah, though, wouldn't you? Because if you look at Pantoja, he wiped out the division before coming champion. He's beaten a lot of them multiple times, hasn't he? Yep. So there's not anybody really there that you could justify, well, they deserve a crack at the title or a crack at Pantoja. Bar Albazi. And where's Albazi at?
Tatsuro Taira was my pick, but now he's booked to fight Royval in October.
There you go.
If he beats Royval, he's got to get the next shot. But yeah, I think give it. I mean, a lot of people might say, "How can you give it to Kai? He's lost his previous 2 fights." But the Amir Albazi fight was controversial. A lot of people spoiled it for Kai. And as we saw with Steve Erceg getting his shot, knockouts matter for the UFC and Dana White. The knockouts matter, and so I just think do Pantoja v Kai in December. You've got Royval Tatsuro Taira happening in October. If Taira wins, then regardless, he gets the shot. If Royval wins, I don't know, do we want to see him fight Pantoja again? Not really. I don't know. As you say, Pantoja, I love that moment. Pantoja was sitting at the side when it was like Royval Moreno or whatever, and he was just saying like 5-0. 5-0, because he'd done Pantoja and Bram Roy, he'd done Royval and Moreno like 5 times together. It's just like, mate, what can you do? And this is a guy that was driving for like Uber Eats a little while ago, wasn't he?
I know, during the COVID pandemic, to make his ends meet, absolutely. Listen, he's a great champion, but I just thought that I don't want to get back to the situation when we had Demetrius Johnson just dominating the division, because it's become exciting again, hasn't it? When Figueiredo came in, secured all these guys, made it exciting again. Flyweight's exciting. From our point of view as British fight fans, it would be great if Mohamed Mokaev was still a UFC fighter, so we could make that argument. We can't, sadly, at the moment. Hopefully that's something that we can revisit in 2025. One thing that we absolutely can talk about is the resurgence of Dan Hooker. Get some tattoos, dye your hair blonde, right? And all of a sudden, you're a contender again, man. Here we go.
We had Dan Hooker on the MMA Fan Show a while ago, just before he fought Arnold Allen, and he was such a good guest. And we mentioned to him that Arnold had said that his nan was quite worried about him fighting Dan Hooker because Dan looked quite big. So we tried to get Dan Hooker to reassure Nana Allen on the show. He was well up for it. He's such a great character and a great laugh. And I remember when I can't remember who he fought in the pandemic, but he fought someone in the pandemic and won.
Poirier. That Poirier 3... When he lost to Poirier 3-2?
He fought someone and then like on really short notice fought Islam Makhachev like days later or something. He came in short notice to fight Islam Makhachev. I swear, unless I'm making it out, I'm sure he fought someone. Then he fought Islam Makhachev. But then we saw those beautiful but heartbreaking moments of him in the whole lockdown hotels in New Zealand where he's...
It affected him big time. The pandemic definitely affected Dan Hooker's career. Definitely.
Yeah, and he was out there, like he couldn't see his family. They were on the other side of a fence, like a few meters away. He couldn't get close to it. It was heartbreaking, but you saw this absolute warrior do what he had to do.
I know what you're referring to.
Yeah,
Nasrat Haqparast. Nasrat Haqparast is who he beat during the pandemic, and then very short notice later, because he did 266 and then he did 267 against Islam. Yes, you're correct. Go on.
That's the one. And to fight Islam Makhachev on short notice, he's just game. He's like, yeah, whatever, do it, mate. And it was absolutely fantastic.
Great impression. Love that.
I don't know, I went a bit Aussie actually, but I'll take it. But it was just so great. And then, to see him fight Gamrot, I mean, I think that fight with Gamrot was very, very tight. I did score it for Dan. I gave, I think, round 1 to Gamrot, rounds 2 and 3 to Dan. But to be honest, it could have gone any of those rounds almost could have gone either way. It was a very, very close fight, I think. But it was just every MMA fan that, I think just cheered at that moment. University was just like, Dan's done it. Dan Hooker is in the top 5. The guy that gave us those fights with Paul Felder didn't he get smashed up by Edson Barboza at one point? With Dustin Poirier, as you mentioned, like, man, I love that guy. The Jalen Turner fight. I mean, I absolutely love Dan Hooker. Stu,
I could tell.
Stu texts me, he's got a massive crush on him. Maybe I do. I don't know. I absolutely love Dan Hooker.
So what do you want him to do next? Who do you want him in with?
I think it's got to be Charles Oliveira.
Look at you. You're a dirty pig. You're dirty. You're filthy.
So for me, it's either Charles Oliveira or Justin Gaethje, and I think Justin Gaethje is just too much. I don't know if Dan Hooker would ever be the same if he got in there with Justin Gaethje. I think he hits too hard, and I know it's carnage and everyone would love it, but there's a part of me that would just, I don't know.
You put him in with the submission king that is Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, but
both of them are violent. Both of them are violent.
Dan's just stuffed the takedowns of Gamrot. Like, I think Gamrot's got better takedowns than Charles Oliveira. So Charles Oliveira, yes, submission guy, but he's got to get him down there, and Dan might not go. Did you see that moment that Gamrot basically had him in the splits? It was like Jean-Claude Van Damme in Kickboxer, getting his legs stretched out. So Gamrot's just lifting his leg up, and Dan Hooker's just hopping back on one leg with his leg behind his head. It was absolutely phenomenal. Like, you got to get Dan Hooker down to get those submissions in. And look, Oliveira might do, but the thought of seeing two men with dyed blonde hair and watching that hair slowly go red on both sides, I'm all for it.
Mate, absolutely all in on that. In fact, I'm all in on a few little narratives because we mentioned the Poirier fight there. Dustin Poirier wants one last dance. Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier dished out one of the greatest fights in the pandemic era. I have no problem rolling that back if they decide to roll that back. But Charles Oliveira is the fight.
I'd have no problem watching it. Is that what Dustin wants for his last fight?
No, I don't think so.
Like Nate Diaz or something like that.
And I think he should. I think Dustin Poirier has earned the right to be able to stick his hand up and choose whatever he wants. One guy that we need to keep our eyes on here is Carlos Prates. He is... a lot of people on the underground have known about him for a period of time because of the work that he's been doing in various gyms all over the world. He's burst onto the scene into the UFC through the Contender Series. He's had 2 good wins. And this, as Brendan pointed out in our preview show, taking on Li Jingliang, who's been out the octagon for a year, was one of those fights where everybody who didn't know too much about Prates would have been going, oof, nice win here. Comeback win for Li Jingliang. How wrong could they be? Because Carlos Prates, his range control, his striking was just... Oh, mate, I was just sat there going, this is gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful brutality. He's a vicious, vicious man and a real problem for this division. Yeah,
man. I mean, those fight nerd guys are smashing it at the moment. You got Gene Silva, Carl Borrelio, as you mentioned, fighting at the weekend.
Yeah.
And now Carlos Prates. I have to say, I'm late to the party. I wasn't really aware of Prates much, but I certainly am now. I mean, that right hand, the left hand, the accuracy and that straight shots that he was landing. I know he finished him with a hook, but the straight shots before it seems like a lazy comparison. But I saw Conor. I saw moments of Conor with that straight left hand. The way
he stretches it, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. The way he was feeling himself in round 2 as well, he was coming out and just shimmying a little bit and enjoying himself. And I also love the fact that he was able to readjust defensively. He was eating some bad leg kicks in that first round. And they said it to him in the corner, you've got to sort out the leg kick. And then he was lifting that leg, he was checking, he was avoiding, he fixed the hole, and he was able to just dominate offensively. And it was just like, yeah, man, this guy's a potential problem.
Knocks out a dude that's never been knocked out before in devastating fashion. He deserved his bonus. Before we move on from UFC 305, our production team who've been working on in the background saying, hey, lads, got a question for you. Can you name your top 5 UFC MMA strikers of all time? Jeez, man, 30 years of history now. We've got to go through and pick out a boatload of fighters in order to create a top 5. I've written down 16 names, so the answer to the question is no, I can't do a top 5. No. I might be able to do one of current fighters.
Yeah.
I'll let you take on the history then, mate. Okay? So who are do you want to word it favourite 5, or do you want to word it as your best 5 strikers? How do you want to word it?
I don't know, man, because this is tricky. This is like, what's your criteria? Is it just the technicality of them being a fantastic striker? Or do you throw in the fact that they have to have achieved a certain amount just relying on their striking? And that's sort of the way I've gone with it. So I
agree with that. I would agree with you then. I would agree facts and stats based on striking in order to back up the argument. So go on, what's you got?
Honourable mentions, like not my top 5, but honourable mentions. Like, and people are going to laugh at this.
No, they won't.
Michel Pereira. I just love that man. Like, that is a guy that I feel like is controlled by a teenager somewhere else in the world who's just playing PlayStation, just doing that. I love Michel Pereira so much. Just backflipping on people. It's illegal. He's illegally backflipped on people before, but no one cares because it's so awesome. Love Michel Pereira. He has to go in as an honourable mention. Obviously, you got Wonder Boy, MVP. These people very rarely ever get beat on the feet.
Hang on.
Go on.
You're not putting Wonder Boy in your top 5. This is this list. I'm looking forward to this list now.
It has to be. It's for me. It has to be achievement. What you achieve? Zabit Magomed Sharipov. I know he's just gone off and been a doctor somewhere or whatever, but that guy would so good. I'm getting too excited.
Come on.
I'll get this as well. Valentina Shevchenko and Jose Aldo, also not in my top 5.
This is, mate. Go from 5 through to 1. What have you got for me?
5. I've got Max Holloway.
Great shout. No problem.
Great shout. I mean, again, takedown defense for days, does everything on the feet. One of the featherweight goats. If he beats Topuria, he is the featherweight goat, maybe. I know Aldo was long reigning for 9 years and all that stuff, but I don't know. He's done Aldo. I love Max Holloway. What he did to Gaethje as well. Like, Max Holloway's got to be in there.
His striking performance against Calvin Cater is probably one of the greatest striking performances that the UFC has ever seen, mate. It was just the punch output, the accuracy, the violence of it. It was just incredible.
The fact that he's talking to DC and going, I'm the best boxer in the UFC, he slips a couple of shots and just throws a jab, and you're like, this guy's unreal.
Okay. So your number 4 is?
Conor McGregor.
I can't argue with you, mate. I think that's a great shout. Carry on.
Look what he did to Alvarez and Aldo, and yeah, you got to have Conor McGregor. Then I've got a sort of 2A, 2B situation.
Oh, here he goes. There's the fence, kids. There's the fence.
I'm struggling. So, all right, I've got Izzy and Pereira. I mean...
Oh, all right, okay. So I know who your number 1... I think I know who your number 1 is then now, because I thought that you might have had 2 others.
Everyone's going to have the same number 1.
Okay, so Izzy and Alex Pereira, you've got them as a joint 2. Okay.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, like what Pereira's achieved in his kickboxing as well, come over. The power is there, but he also just... Those fucking... Sorry, low language thing. That's
how exciting he is.
Those calf kicks to just come out of nowhere. The memes, just what he's done where he just shoos her being out of the way. No, I also have nuts of stone, not just hands of stone. And then just plonks him with that. Oh, man. Pereira is unreal. Izzy, I think... Maybe you would say Pereira's 3, Izzy's 2. I don't know, but... Izzy is definitely up there, man. I mean, to have done what he's done with basically no ground game. It's, he defends the takedowns well. He lights people up on the feet. He was very conservative in some fights, but hey, it worked. he evaded people really well, barely took strikes in a lot of fights. And then he's got some great highlight reel knockouts as well. Izzy is there. And then number one, you've got to go Anderson Silva. I don't know how you can look past Anderson Silva. Vitor Belfort knockout, Forrest Griffin knockout. Was it 16-fight win streak, 12 KOs? Like, he just, that man was insane. So, yeah.
I think the majority of people are nodding along at your number one there, mate. I love the debates that you create, though, with some of your chats. Listen, I'm a massive Wonderboy fan. I think he's a beautiful, beautiful striker. But I like the fact that you prefix this with the facts and stats have got to live up to something. I can't argue with anything that you've said there. The only other one that I would probably... Listen, I love Valentina as a striker. I think she's fantastic. Dustin Poirier might come into... Because I just love his striking.
Yeah.
All right. And if we're looking at current champions, bro, there's two in there that I love. One of them's called Sugar Sean O'Malley, right? And he can take people out. Listen.
No, I don't know.
And you mentioned the fight there where you've got Max Holloway. Ilia Topure's boxing is just outrageous. Yes. This could be one of the best striking matches that we've ever seen in the UFC when Max and Ilia go at it.
I agree. For me, I don't know. I want to see Sean and Ilia achieve a bit more before
I get that.
In like an
the question was all time. The question was all time. I'm just highlighting some of the best ones. Interesting that
history than me. Like, where would Mirko Krokop fit in all that? Because I don't think I really saw the heyday of Mirko Krokop.
People like him and Fedor Emelianenko absolutely are in this conversation. 100%. And there'll be people screaming at the screen here, mate. You know what it's like. The comment section is going to be lit up with loads of different. Jose Aldo, Edson Barboza, if you want to bring in the leg kicks. Yes. You've got the Alistair Overeems of this world, who was a fantastic kickboxer pre-UFC and then obviously came into the UFC and did it extremely well. John Jones himself, he can be anybody, anywhere, anywhere that he wants to go about it. And a man that we've mentioned a little earlier on in the programme, as if we didn't mention Francis, right? Come on, man. He puts people to kick with just one shot.
But again, it's like your criteria, isn't it? It's like, is power the main thing, or is it like, because like the elegance of some of the strikers we're talking about?
I'll tell you one of the best recent striking performances that I've seen against an unbelievable striker as well was at UFC 286, Leon Kamaru 3, the co-main event. Justin Gaethje's performance against Rafael Fiziev was outstanding, mate. Justin Gaethje could be in this conversation.
Yeah, he could be. That's the thing, there's so many. You can't win. You can't, there's always going to be someone in the YouTube comments having a go at you because you forgot someone. I mean, I forgot Dustin Poirier. How dare I? What an idiot I am. But yeah, it's hard. There's so many good ones.
And there's going to be loads from the OGs of talking about the Chuck Liddells and the Vanderlei Silvers of this world. Listen, fill your boots, man. The comment section is there for you. Fill your boots. Make your top 5. I put it on Blake there. Made it very difficult for him. I actually love your top 5 of Max Holloway, Conor McGregor, Pereira, Izzy, and Anderson Silva. I don't think you can go much wrong with that, mate, because those have made a living of standing on their feet and knocking dudes out. Simple as. Great stuff. One person that is standing on his feet, knocking dudes out, then maybe submitting them a little bit, doing a bit of ground and pound, elbowing the living daylights out of them, is our champion, Tom Aspinall.
Yes.
What have you made of his back and forth with Mr. Jones recently?
I worry that he's just sort of shouting into the void, really. It's just like, I think Jones is going to retire after Stipe, which is a fight that no one other than Jones, Stipe, and Dana White won that fight. I don't know anyone that is really clamoring for that fight. Everyone wants to see Tom v. Jones. That's what they want to see. Stipe, Stipe, greatest heavyweight of all time, sure, but he's only like 4 years out the cage. Last fight got knocked out by Ngannou. It's not the same Stipe, so it doesn't mean anything. Like, John Jones's legacy for me is not going to improve at all because he beat Stipe Miocic.
No.
If he beat Tom Aspinall,
wow,
it would improve dramatically for me. So I don't know. Have we just got that British bias, or is that the way everyone's thinking? I don't know. But a win over Stipe Miocic at this stage means nothing to me. Whereas,
no, and I think
Tom would mean everything.
Yeah, and I think that I've no problem with legend fights or anything like that. I kind of like, and I want the UFC to celebrate those legends a little bit more. Like, for example, when they had the fight with Nico and Robbie Lawler, and Robbie Lawler gets his swan song, and everybody can celebrate Robbie Lawler in that moment. Fantastic. I love all that type of thing. But it wasn't a title fight. We're not holding up a division. We are not stopping the best against the best. That's what the UFC has been built on over the years. We've got a champion in John. He got injured. Okay. We've now got an interim champion. And the rules have always been champion fights interim champion when the champion is no longer injured and ready to return. And that is what absolutely should be happening. If John wants to fight Stipe, cool. Give us the belt back and let the rest of the division move on. And the next top challenger can take on Tom Aspinall. It's a shame for Tom because I genuinely believe exactly what you've just said there. From a Tom Aspinall point of view, this is what sends you to superstardom. It creates that legacy-defining moment and it creates a new superstar for the UFC. So for me, the UFC should absolutely be bashing the drum to try and make that particular fight because he's young enough to carry this for the next 2 to 3 years before he decides to retire. From a John point of view, I think nobody's ever going to take away what he did at light heavyweight, mate. Nobody's ever going to take that away. It's one of the greatest things. It'll never be repeated. Let's be dead honest about it. It was absolutely outrageous. And now that he is at heavyweight, I don't know if you remember this from the world of boxing. Floyd Mayweather, Canelo Alvarez. Floyd fought Canelo when he was relatively young, bit wet behind the ears, relatively naive. I'm not saying that that's what Tom is. But what he did that night is that he showed the young pup, the young up-and-comer, the guy that was barking a bit, he schooled him. And he allowed his legacy to live on after retirement. Because every time Canelo fights now, who's gone on to become an absolute great, they keep showing, well, came up against Floyd and he fell short against Floyd. That's the opportunity I see for John. John's got an opportunity here to prove to everybody, any doubter, I'm the guy. And it doesn't matter who the other guy is. I will show you what's what. That fight has to happen. It has to happen for everybody involved. More so now for John, because if he walks away now, even though nothing's going to ever be taken away from that light heavyweight reign, there are a certain, maybe a large percentage of the fans are going to say, you never made the Francis Ngannou fight, and now you never made this. And that is going to stick with him. That shadow is going to stick with whenever they talk about John Jones in the future. If he takes this fight, I think that goes away.
Yeah. I think you're right, but I don't know how much he would care. I mean, I
don't think he cares. I don't think he does care.
I think Tom's a horrendous matchup for him. I'm not saying he can't win it. I'm not saying that, we've never seen Tom put on his back, and Jones might be the guy to be able to do that. I'm not saying Jones can't win it, but I think it's a horrendous matchup for him on paper. And what really rubs me up the wrong way, and I've got no proof of this, but this is my gut feeling, is that if there was any way that he could fight Alex Pereira after Stipe, I
agree.
He would take it.
I agree.
He would take it because he knows that stylistically that is a fight he can win very well. And Alex is probably a bigger star than Tom at the moment.
Yeah.
So he would take that fight. So it's not that he doesn't want to fight anyone. It's that he doesn't want to fight Tom. And that really bothers me.
Yeah. The risk of loss, he knows it's there.
It's massively there.
He knows.
Massively there. Look at Tom. Tom's smashing people up.
Yeah, but listen, awesome, as always. Final thought on fighters posting their injuries online when they've got a fight booked within 4 weeks, mate. It's Mirab. You've kind of got to expect it from Mirab, haven't you? This is how he rolls.
I have to say, I love Mirab. I fell in love with Mirab when do you remember that post he did where he dived into the icy water and then not only did
Bust his head?
Yeah, he busted his head open. This is years ago. And he dived into the icy water, busted his head open. Like, what are you doing? But he put it on social media. But then he went back to the same, icy lake or whatever it was with loads of boxing gear on, hung from a tree and started punching up the ice like he got his revenge. I'm like, I love you. You're a laugh. This is brilliant. And then he's gone and done all the funny little skits he's done with the fake Sean O'Malley and all that stuff. Good stuff, man. Your social media has skyrocketed. People care now. Him throwing down Cejudo in front of Mark Zuckerberg and chatting and all that kind of stuff and having a laugh. Everyone now loves Merab. He went from being in on the MMA fan show. We got this thing about like the room, and like Leon was in the room. He couldn't get a title shot, but then he got out. Bilal was in the room. Merab was in the room. Now Ankalaev is alone in the room. Like all that kind of stuff. Like the sad little room where people have earned a title shot, but they're never getting it. And Ankalaev's alone in that room now. Merab's out. Everyone's a big Merab fan now. But just because your social media has gone so well doesn't mean you have to put everything on it. And you've just given a target to a man who is a sniper of just like there and just like that cut. And I don't think it's very clever. I don't always agree with Dana White, but Dana White coming out and saying that that's a stupid thing to do, I do agree with.
I agree as well, mate. But I can't wait for the fight. And UFC Notch at the Sphere is all set for something spectacular the next time we get a big numbered card. What's coming up next on your podcast, man? Come on, listen, you've been kind enough to step in for Brendan. Plug the living daylights out your stuff. Let the people know, because I'm sure there's loads of MMA fans that want more content.
Well, we've got a situation where we have a little studio that we film in, so we're trying to get the content looking really nice and cool for all you guys. But I am kind of filming at the moment, back and forth on a job in Budapest. So some of it is remote, some of it isn't. But we will be trying to get as many interviews as we can with as many fighters as we can, and we will also be just talking about the cards. So the latest episode is the our aftermath of UFC 305. We might be doing another one talking about what's just going on this weekend: Baralio versus Cannonier, and then maybe a little in the same
good fight, by the way.
Good fight.
Good fight.
There's a couple of other things on that card as well. Angela Hill, who we've had on the show, is fighting, and then Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady is the week after, which is a really interesting fight at welterweight. And then obviously, as you've mentioned, when it comes to all the Noche UFC stuff, which is a really great card as well, we will be doing our preludes to that fight and talk about what we think is going to be happening with the fights, and then the aftermath of the fights as well.
Top stuff. Make sure you check it out. Blake, thank you so much for your time, your patience, and your expertise, mate. Much appreciated. For everybody that has enjoyed the show, thank you so much. Make sure you like and subscribe to the talkSPORT MMA YouTube channel. Don't forget, a little bit later on the channel, Gareth A. Davies will be in Washington, D.C. For the Francis Ngannou PFL press conference. It'll be live on the channel, so you can check all that out. And then next week, we'll hopefully be speaking to a very victorious Brendan Loughnane in the aftermath of his semi-final, which takes place on Friday evening. Make sure you check in that fight out as well. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next time.